Hi, I'm Natalie Mullen, former people pleaser and queen of doing way too much, turned holistic life coach and wellness educator for purpose seeking women of color and allies. Welcome to From a Full Cup. On this podcast, I teach you how to use the 12 pillars of wellness to discover your purpose, uplevel your well being, and create the life of your dreams because we all deserve to be fulfilled, and you simply can't pour from an empty cup. Through candid conversations, insightful interviews, and motivational nuggets, you'll feel inspired, empowered, and supported as together we navigate this thing called life, holistically and with your well being at the center. If you're committed to personal development and you're ready for more, you're in the right place. Now let's get started.
I realized I've been living in fight or flight my whole life, as far back as I can remember. I didn't know that rushed and anxious feeling that I had was a dysregulation.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited for you to hear this conversation today with Lisa Cipparone. Lisa is a nervous system reset practitioner and an expressive arts therapist in training. And this conversation was so good. And actually, it got even better after I stopped the recording. I wish you could have heard because we talked for another half an hour after I stopped the recording. And Lisa has so much knowledge, so much experience in this area. And it was really just such a privilege for me to listen to her and really understand more about the nervous system, how it impacts us, how it impacts our body, and why it's so important for us to learn how to regulate ourselves and how this is related to trauma and just different experiences. And I find this kind of thing so interesting. So I was definitely nerding out throughout this conversation and the post conversation afterwards. But I really hope that you'll learn something new in this conversation. You'll find it helpful and applicable to your life in some way. And, Lisa does a really good job of explaining. So without further ado, make sure you grab a pen, take some notes, and let's begin. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Full Cup. I am so excited today to have with me Lisa Cipparone. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Lisa, can you start off by just introducing yourself?
Yes. So I am a seasoned wellness practitioner. I've been a yoga teacher for 23 years, a energy healer for about 23 years, and more recently, I'm a nervous system reset practitioner. And currently, I'm training to become an expressive arts therapist. I'm a therapist in training at the Crate Institute in Toronto.
Lisa, I'd like to start with the This Filled My Cup segment. Can you tell me about a past episode that really spoke to you?
The episode that filled my cup was season 2, episode 23, Imposter Syndrome, and the importance of positive self talk, being your own best enthusiastic cheerleader, knowing your wisdom and your greatness and your brilliance, and stepping into it fully.
Awesome. I'm so excited to get into this conversation because when we first met and you talked about the nervous system, I think at that time, I didn't really understand too much about the nervous system, how it impacts our body. I wasn't really understanding about regulation and
Mm.
dysregulation. I have a toddler, so now it's really
Mm.
top of mind for me because I notice I'm becoming dysregulated quite often.
Mhm.
And so I really wanted to have this conversation to explore this further because I don't think a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people just talk about stress and that's it, but we're not talking about what's happening in the body, what can we feel, and how it's impacting our nervous system. But before we get into all of that, let's start with the backstory. What is your personal backstory and how did you end up getting involved in this line of work?
So, as I said, I've been in the wellness industry for a number of years, teaching yoga, seeing clients for different things. And then my mom passed away. I'm someone who's been in a lot of car accidents as well. I've had a lot of head injuries and concussions. And my mom passed away in November 2020. And I really woke up to all of my own trauma. What I thought was just a car accident was actually traumatizing and traumatic event for me that I didn't put in that category. So I woke up and I went on a deep dive on the nervous system. And this is 2020, so 4 years ago. So it was just really burgeoning. And I found a program called Nervous System Reset and dove right in as a client myself, and it changed my life. From that moment, as I went into the program, I realized I've been living in fight or flight my whole life, or at least until as far back as I can remember. I didn't know that that rushed and anxious feeling that I had was a dysregulation. I thought that was just me really excited and kind of overwhelmed. And that was okay. But really, it's not. We should be able to find peace and calm. So, what leaves us when we have a traumatic event or experience is that felt sense of safety. And I recall a friend asking me, well, what do you need? And I said, I need to feel safe. And I didn't get the depth of that until I went into that program, woke up to myself and where I was in my nervous system dysregulation, and with psychoeducation about the nervous system, like a whole world opened up to me, a whole language opened up to me. So now I'm what I call nervous system informed. There's trauma informed, and I'm also nervous system informed. Yeah.
Wow, and I'm sorry for the loss of your mother. And you know, sometimes it's loss or tragedy, and you experience other kinds. So even the car accidents, multiple and different concussions, all of this is actually stored in the body,
Yeah.
right? And this is something kind of new to me. Again, it wasn't talked about in my world, like this whole
Mhm.
idea of trauma being stored in the body and the mind body connection. It's actually through this podcast and speaking with guests that I have learned so much about this topic, and then I kind of go and do my own research, and I find this really interesting to understand not just trauma that's stored in our body, but also when our bodies are dysregulated, when our nervous system is dysregulated, how this impacts our overall well being. And there's so many connections because when you think about wellness, it's all interconnected, right?
Yeah.
And so things are happening in people's bodies. Maybe they feel stressed, they feel burnt out, they feel anxious, they feel depressed, whatever it is. And they're not realizing that that might actually have other implications in your physical body, in your rest, in the way you eat. You know what I mean? Like other parts. And so this is why having a holistic view and also holistic tools. We need a bigger toolkit. It's always therapy, which therapy is great, but there are other things in the toolkit too besides that, and some of them can be activated by yourself and some of them you might need support with. But I think the more that we know, we can expand our toolkit and have different options for different scenarios. So, with that said, let's start with the very basics. I want you to tell me, why is it important for us to regulate our nervous system, and how do we know when we're dysregulated?
So, how do we know when we're dysregulated? Our physiology changes when a traumatic event happens to us. We're in chronic stress. So, I said earlier that I woke up and began to realize that I've been living in that fight flight experience. I'm going to make a distinction between activation and dysregulation. Activation is in the moment, dysregulation comes later. So when we get activated by a traumatic event, a shocking experience, a car accident, we see something violent, we're in a job that's really stressful, and we become activated by another request from our boss. So different physiological things happen. So our breathing can change. It can become really shallow or really rapid. Our muscles can tense up as well. Our heart rate can also shift. We can have heart palpitations. There can be a change in the temperature of our body. We can get really, really cold or really, really hot. We can actually, we can have fogginess. So when we're in dysregulation, when we're in acute activation, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. So we can't hear very well. We can't comprehend what's going on very well. We're in that like deer to headlight kind of a shock place. And our brain kind of stops functioning, goes offline. We can get really defensive as well or feel really bored, surprisingly. So that's activation, right? So it's important to regulate our nervous system because we don't want to live in that activated state, in that hyper aroused state, because it can, as you said, affect our health, right? We don't eat properly and other things can occur. So when we are dysregulated, that is when we've been living in this stress response. We haven't been able to complete the cycle, the stress response. We haven't been able to get out of that activated state. So, if we think about a temperature gauge for a minute, And on the bottom of the temperature gauge is social engagement. We're all really happy and we can have a nice conversation. We're getting along. As you go up the gauge, you get frustration, for example, maybe a little bit of anger, maybe a little bit of upset or rage, and then we go into overwhelm. So a healthy nervous system can ebb and flow like a wave. It can be activated and go up, and then it can come back down. We can come out of that stress response and come back into social engagement. And then we can get activated again. We can elevate up temperature gauge and we can come back down. It's when we begin to go up and don't come all the way down. And then we go up again and then we don't come all the way down. So we begin to live in these hyper aroused state. We begin to live in a stress response. We begin to live in a traumatic response the body gives us. So I will come back to that safety word. Our body is only trying to keep us safe. That's what it's programmed to do, right?
Can you explain more about what is the relationship then between safety and between the nervous system?
It's a great question. So, safety is what our nervous system is trying to do. So our nervous system is like a lighthouse. So, if you think of a lighthouse is trying to search for danger, right? It looks all around, it lights up the whole area, and it's looking for danger. And if no danger is found, then our nervous system can help us relax, soften, shift into that social engagement way of feeling, and we feel safe. So, safety is a felt sense. I
Mm,
want to just broaden this topic for a moment because as a yoga teacher, I would try and make the space that I was teaching in really beautiful. And I
mhm,
would have candles and I would have incense, and I'd make it a sacred, safe space for my students to come into. But what I later learned was if students coming in are dysregulated, if they're activated, nothing I do will make them feel safe.
mm.
Safety comes from a physiological response. It's a physically felt sense. So only that person can help themselves feel safe. I can make it pretty, but they need to, for example, pause when they come into my room, allow their nervous system to look around the space that they're in, orient to the space, see where the exits are, see where the windows are, see and assess how many students are in the room, where the teacher is. And when their nervous system understands where they are in space and that the space that they're in is a safe one, it looks safe, it feels safe, smells lovely, then the physiology can shift, we can downregulate, we can settle in, and we can feel calm, right? So safety is critical piece of the puzzle. And our body, our nervous system is trying to keep us safe. It will create a maladaptive nervous system, a one that's always in hyper arousal, always in fight, flight, freeze, fawning, fidget, collapse as a way of keeping us safe. And this is really important to understand because it takes the burden off the person with that experience thinking, oh, it's my fault. Something's
Right,
wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. How brilliant is your nervous system in your body to keep you in that place where you're ready to run, you're
right.
ready to fight because safety is first, right? Safety first. As a mom, you know, safety first, right? That's
Yeah,
the brand. So safety is a felt sense experience. And when it has escaped us because of a traumatic experience, our body will do anything and everything possible to keep us safe. And that includes rewiring our brain, rewiring our body so that we're always in an engaged, hyperactive awareness so that we can be safe.
that's really helpful to know. And what are some of the common experiences or triggers? So you've mentioned a few of them, like perhaps somebody's in an abusive situation, or they might have had a traumatic accident, they might have had a loss. What are some other triggers or experiences that would cause the nervous system to go into that maladaptive state and not be able to recover?
So I think it's really individual. I think it can be anything. So if someone's been in a physically abusive relationship and they go to a dance, and everyone's dancing and their arms are in the air and flailing around, that could be activating for them when they see unexpected movement coming toward them.
Mm.
So for me as a car accident person, I've had a lot of car accidents. Sometimes when a car is driving really close behind me, they they stop really quickly, or they're my chevron. I haven't got enough chevrons in front of me. I can get activated. If someone is speeding by me, I can get activated. So I think it really depends on that individual's circumstances, living conditions, situation. Where are they in the world? I think it's really individual. And your boss can be aggressive. Maybe you have an abusive partner and then your boss is of the same sex and they're really also aggressive. So it can really be anything.
What I take from this is that the activation, it does not have to be the actual act itself. It can just be an emotion or a motion or something that triggers the memory of that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And that is enough, even just the memory of it, because you've experienced it before. So now it's come right back and you can recall it quickly to bring you back into this activated state. So, how does this connect then to restorative tremors?
So restorative tremor is an opportunity for someone to complete the stress cycle. It's an opportunity for someone to open up a new regulation pathway where the energy that was created from a traumatic experience or event, a shocking trauma, chronic stress to have a release. So in our society, we get embarrassed. So, when you have a dog or a cat or an animal and they have a fright and then they just automatically just twitch and tremor and have a little bit of a shake.
Right.
That's a neuromuscular response to the completion of a stress response. So that dog or cat was activated. Then they realize that experience is over. They have a little bit of a twitch or tremor, and that's not them shaking their physical body themselves. It comes from a deeper neuromuscular place in the body. So that neuromuscular response comes online and the energy from that experience gets discharged, cleared, it gets alleviated. I want to be careful of my words here. So in this process in nervous system reset, restorative tremor comes in the program about halfway. It comes in after a lot of resourcing has been done with the client. And what I mean by that is I've worked with the client one on one and we test and scale. So we measure specific sensory explorations like external orienting, internal orienting, movement, touch. And we figure out by scaling how do you feel from a scale of 1 to 10 now? And then how do you feel after doing the exercise? So, after a lot of resourcing and discovering which support them the most, and after a lot of about 3 or 4 weeks of them working with the resources, on their own to begin to regulate their nervous system, to begin to develop a communication and dialogue with their nervous system so they understand what activation feels like in their body, what settling can feel like in their body. So they have a better understanding of how their body's trying to communicate with them. That's
Okay.
foundational work before we shift into restorative tremor. So once that has been established, they really understand their nervous system now. They understand the cues their body is giving them, and they know how to read the cues. And they know when they're going into overwhelm or when they're feeling settled. They know what their threshold of enough is and what their capacity is, how much they can hold if they're done and they want to stop the session, or if they have the capacity to experience more. And that's another really important point, knowing your capacity and when
Right.
you've had enough, when you're satisfied, satiated, and a little bit full, or when you're going having too many plates of beautiful, beautiful buffet. I always use Indian food because I love Indian food and I always eat too much of it in the sitting, right? You go up for the
Mhm.
fourth plate because it's so good and you can't stop. And you're like, wait a minute, now I've got indigestion. I've
Right.
had too much. Do you want to stop just before that? So a lot of work is done before tremor is introduced in this process.
Okay.
So once that person is really clear at how their system is dialoguing with them, then we introduce restorative tremor. So restorative tremor can look and feel like warmth, tingling, buzzing, purring, electrical current, or it can be a bit stronger and it can feel like a tremble, or tremor, or a full on shake. So
Okay.
the client is not shaking their body purposefully. This comes from a deeper neuromuscular release. So what we're doing is, so often when there's a traumatic experience, and then the person realizes that they're actually okay now, and our body wants to go into that natural tremor, we hold it down because we're embarrassed. We don't know what's going on. So we tense up and just kind of, I'm fine. I'm fine. Or we're put into an ambulance and we're strapped down. And
Mm.
even if we want to tremor, we can't because we're literally strapped on the table, or we're given morphine, or we're given some kind of medication to sedate us. So for the most part, people don't allow their system to naturally go into that neuromuscular tremoring response.
Mhm.
So this work reawakens that neuromuscular response. It brings it back online so that that feeling of warmth or tingling or buzzing or purring can find that natural pathway that was initially shut down. It opens it back up again, and it can slowly begin to release. And the client knows how to resource themselves if it becomes too much. And I'll also say that we tremor for maybe 5 seconds, no more than 3 minutes. Most people tremor between 10 seconds and a minute. In the tremor process,
Does it increase over time? Do you increase the amount, or because
it
I wanna
depends.
know, how do we know when it's all been released? Or is it just a forever release? Like, that's what I wanna.
Um, yeah, it's kind of like, I think if the person's coming to me with a long history of trauma, then it can take several months. It can take several years, and life continues to happen. So it's a forever tool, right? So it's in that toolbox. It is something that we can use for past trauma and current everyday life.
And then when we implement that, is that what allows us to then move to another stage of being able to experience joy, being
Yes.
able to experience freedom, play, curiosity, wonder? Like, these are some of the other things that you spoke about. Because I imagine, like, obviously, if we're trying to escape trauma and we're trying to overcome certain situations, what are we coming out of it to? I'd love for you to talk about how can this be a tool that would support and empower individuals to live joyfully and more playfully.
So I spoke about capacity before. This I like to call it the circle of capacity, coined by one of my teachers. We talked about the normal term is window of tolerance. We don't want to tolerate things; we want to have a capacity for them. So
Mhm.
as we build our capacity in our nervous system with all of the resourcing that we're doing, the gentle and very, very slow or sort of tremor process, we begin to build more capacity to hold harder stuff. And we have the capacity to hold more joy and pleasure. And when I say the word pleasure, I mean all kinds of pleasure, right? Every kind of pleasure you can think of, that's possible in this work because the same muscle is triggered in the I don't want to use I'm going to take that word triggered back. The same muscle is utilized in restorative tremor as it is in orgasmic pleasure. So when we can relax and release that energy, other forms of pleasure awaken in our body as well. So there's that daily joyful presence with your child because you can be more present
Right.
when you're more relaxed and grounded, and you can experience more joy with your partner if you feel relaxed, present, and grounded. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love how it ties into capacity, because I think for any of the listeners, sometimes even at the most basic level, if you just think of capacity as what can you hold and not hold, right? Like, in your life, what do you have space for? And let's just think about, like, in your brain, like, what do you have space for and not have space for? And I feel like in today's society, our brains are kind of clogged, and or even our emotions. Like, and I think we're using this word a lot. Like, I don't have capacity for this,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
people are becoming more vocal and advocating for themselves. And then obviously for this, I like that this is a way to release some of what has been clogging up that
mhm,
capacity, so
Mhm.
that you can then again have more space, and space leads to joy and playfulness. So I absolutely love that. For my final question, I'd love to know what is maybe just one or two practical tips that you can give the listeners who might feel that they need to start some regulation within their own nervous system.
I'll give you 2. Yawning. Yawn, yawn, yawn.
Oh, wow.
Yawning as much as you can. Never suppress a yawn. We've been taught that yawning is rude. We've been taught that passing gas is rude. We've been taught that burping is rude. That's your physiology. And if we suppress it, we're suppressing our physiology. Those 3 things, yawning especially, is our body literally down regulating, relaxing. A yawn in front of somebody else actually means I feel comfortable enough to relax in front of you, to open my throat to you and my mouth to you, but this is a vulnerable area of my body. But if
Right.
you allow yourself to yawn, and you can bring on your own yawn as well. If you allow yourself to yawn, we shift out of that default imaginal brain, that busy brain, and we go into the salience network of the brain where we're more grounded and relaxed. We can see how the value in our life, we can see our supportive networks, and we can just really settle. Second tool is allow yourself to orient to every space that you go into. So when you walk into a new space, whether it's a grocery store, your car, a different room in your house, pause. Slowly look around the room that you're in, move your head and your eyes from one side to the ceiling, to the floor, to the other side, ceiling, floor, looking behind you, really slow, looking for an exit, look beyond and outside a window if you can, and give your body, give your nervous system a few moments to understand and take in where you are, to realize that you are in a safe surrounding if you are. And once your nervous system realizes that you're safe and it has a chance to orient to the space that you're in, you will again begin to settle and relax. So yawning and external orienting or focusing and giving yourself time to see where you are in space.
I love that. Those are such great tips. I don't think I've ever heard either of those before.
Mm.
The yawning, passing out, burping, kind of put those together, and then orienting yourself to the physical space. That those sound genius, and I think that those are things that people can actionably do right away. They don't need to purchase anything. They don't need a course. It's just something that they can do with their own body. So, I love that. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on today's show and just really helping us to understand the importance of the nervous system. And I think also to give more love to our bodies, because our bodies
Mhm.
are doing a lot to protect us. And
Yeah.
I have a better appreciation for my body after what you've explained, and for my nervous system, and its role in just in keeping me safe. And I think sometimes we can be really hard on ourselves, especially as women. We can be really hard on ourselves and on our bodies. And so I think this is just a moment for those listening, and for myself too, to just just say thank you, and just take a moment to appreciate your body and your nervous system for all it's doing. And now we will transition to rapid fire. So are you ready?
Mm.
Okay. The first question is, what is something on your bucket list that you have not done yet?
I think go to somewhere like Bali, Costa Rica, or Hawaii.
Okay. With If you could master one skill overnight, what would it be?
Patience.
Oh, me too. Okay. Would you rather take a cruise or do an all-inclusive vacation?
Neither. Oh my goodness. I can't do I know my nervous system would not like either one of those. I would
You're
feel there's too many people at the all inclusive and too many buffet choices. I would get overwhelmed. Sorry, but
okay.
neither one.
You know what? That's okay. I'll take them both on my end.
It's like
Go a spiral together. What is an impactful book you've read that you would recommend others should read?
Peter Levine, I believe it's called Chasing the Tiger. Anything by Peter Levine. So Peter Levine is like the father of trauma, the father of all of this work that's really coming to the forefront.
What's your favorite way to fill your cup?
Walking in the woods, being in nature, laying on the earth, laying under trees, leaning against trees, feeling the earth, like barefoot walking, swimming naked.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question for you is, in 3 words, what would you describe as your wealthy life? And I spell wealthy WELLTHY.
Family, friends, And rest. Mm,
Okay. I
yeah,
love that. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing with all of us, just again, the importance of the nervous system, why it's important to have that reset, to learn how to close that stress response, to learn to even be able to identify when there are maladaptations so that we don't get to the point of full dysregulation. And just knowing that even if things happen, there are tools that we can add to our toolkit to help us out so we don't have to stay
yeah.
stuck. We can process that. So, to the listeners, make sure you check out Lisa's work, follow her, connect with her. I'm sure she would be great to work with if you'd like to reach out to her and explore that further. Thank you for tuning in and continue to serve yourself, your loved ones, and your communities from a full cup.